Tonight's program is Conversation with award-winning sports writer Tom Gage and 8-time All-Star player Lance Parrish, followed by a Q&A with the audience. Copies of their new book, The Enchanted Season, will be on sale as well as signing at the end. For sale as well as signing. Tom Gage worked for the Detroit News as the Detroit Tiger beat writer for 36 years, and in that time covered more than 5,000 Detroit Tiger games. In 2016, Tom was inducted into the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame, and in 2020, into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. The Enchanted Season is Tom's fourth book. Big Wheel Lance Parrish helped lead the Tigers to the 1984 World Series championship. He won 6 Silver Slugger awards and 3 Gold Glove awards. Over his 19 Major League Baseball seasons, he compiled a .252 batting average with 324 home runs, 1,070 RBIs. The Enchanted Season takes readers through the unforgettable 1984 season. Please help me welcome Tom Gage and Lance Parrish. Just one other thing, when we do the Q&A, because this is being streamed, it's important that I have the microphone in front of you. So raise your hand when the time comes and you can ask questions. Yeah, when we do the Q&A, not before that. Okay, thank you. Have at it.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out. It's a great delight to be here, and as it was a great delight to cover the Tigers. As she said, I covered them for 36 years. A lot of bad years, a lot of good years. Some players I liked, most players I liked. Some I didn't. Some who didn't like me, and that's just the way it goes when you're a reporter. For the most part, I was able to eventually work around the guys who didn't like me, and Jack Morris and I have eventually became friends. But Jack was one of the difficult ones. But anyway, I had the great pleasure of covering Lance's career, not quite from the beginning to the end, and not the end and not the beginning, but for many years in the middle. I knew him to be a really fine player, a great catcher, a pretty good hitter, some flaws, but yeah, he had his moments. As she said, an 8-time All-Star, 6 of those were with the Tigers, and he was drafted in the first round by the Tigers in 1974. That's right, and. But anyway, so few. In the book, we go back to Lance's childhood. He was born in Pennsylvania. He moved to California with his mother and his sister when he was 6 years old. His dad had gone out. His dad was going to work for the L.A. Sheriff's Office. He had worked for the police department in Clerton, Pennsylvania, and decided to move out to L.A. because he was tired of the Pennsylvania winters, and a cousin of his mother said, "Hey, they're looking for people." So it was they moved outside L.A. and in 1962, and and Lance doesn't remember too much of Pennsylvania other than falling out of a tree and breaking his collarbone, right? But the thing is, California is where he learned to play baseball. And we go back and, kids don't really want to catch. There aren't too many volunteers to be a catcher. How did you become a catcher?
I volunteered. I mean, first day of practice, my first year in Little League, our manager asked the team when we were all gathered together, who on this team catches or would like to catch? And nobody raised their hand. So I'll do it. I figured, that's a quick way to get in the lineup, right? Nobody else will do it. I'll do it. So I ended up catching from that point, actually, all the way through my senior year in high school. I mean, I played other positions. I think they let everybody pitch at one time or another, and I threw pretty hard, so I was a natural candidate for that. All I could throw was a fastball and a little spinner slider. So, but that qualified me. I actually threw the ball pretty well my senior year in high school. And when the Tigers drafted me, I kind of thought I might have a chance of being a pitcher. And they threw me for a loop when they drafted me and told me they wanted me to play third base. It's like, okay. I had played third base a little bit my senior year because our regular third baseman was out. I had split my finger, when I was catching the very first game after the basketball season. So when it had healed enough, they threw me out on third base. And my only guess is that when the Tiger Scouts came to watch me play in high school, I was playing third base. So they said, well, we want you to play third base. I said, okay, I'm your guy. So I gave it a run. I played 1 year at third base in rookie ball, and then right after that, they said, you know what, we're going to make you a catcher. So I said, all right, good to go. I'm all right with that.
But we almost lost him to football because he got a full ride scholarship to UCLA and went on a lot of recruiting trips to big schools. And I think you decided between baseball and football. But all of a sudden, it's draft day, and Lance is a good player. He's certainly he's rumored to be a first-round draft choice, and he turns out to be a first-round draft choice. But draft day in 1974 doesn't go quite the way you thought it would. How did it go?
Well, first of all, to take it one step back, I was pretty naive to the whole process. I played 3 sports in high school. Played football, basketball, baseball. I didn't really follow baseball close enough to know really what was involved in the whole scouting and getting drafted and how much bonus money you can expect and all that. In fact, I had a coach come up to me my senior year in high school and said, you know what, you're going to be a number 1 draft pick, I'm telling you right now. And do not take anything less than $100,000. And I was like, he could have said $100 million. $100,000 back then was like $100 million to me. It was like insane to even think about that. So I didn't really understand how anything worked. I watched some games on TV. I used to listen to games on the radio because my dad always had either the Dodgers or the Angels on out in California when he was doing projects in the backyard, and I was always hanging out back there, helping him out. But so it comes down to draft day, and I had just a few weeks prior to that had a workout at Anaheim Stadium where the Angels play, and I thought I killed it, to be honest with you. I don't think I could have had a better workout. I hit the ball really well. I hit a bunch of balls out of the ballpark during batting practice. They had me throw from the outfield. I thought, my arm felt great. I was throwing well. And then they put me behind the plate, and they said, the guy that was standing there with the stopwatch said, look, if you can throw the ball down to second base in under 2 seconds, you can throw anybody out in the major leagues. Well, every ball I threw down there was under 2 seconds. I was, 1.9, 1.8 something, so I'm thinking, there's no way these guys aren't drafting me. I just felt I'm gonna be an angel. It's great. So here comes draft day. I remember I was in my last class of the day, and our high school baseball coach knocked on the door and asked the teacher, hey, I need to talk to Lance. Can I just run him out in the hallway for a minute? So brought me out in the hallway, and he had a big smile on his face, and he shakes my hand, and he says, congratulations. He goes, you're the number 1 draft pick of the Detroit Tigers. And it's like, the Detroit Tigers? And I've said this before, I really didn't even know where Detroit was, and that just shows you how closely I followed professional baseball. But, he said, you're the number 1 pick, Detroit Tigers, blah, blah, he was all excited, so I was like, yeah, okay, and I kept thinking, I can't believe the Angels didn't draft me. I mean, what went wrong there? So anyway, went back to class, and we got done with that, and then after that was over, I headed out to the athletic building, and all the coaches were down there. So our athletic director, who is also our head football coach, he's in there, and everybody's shaking my hand, and he goes, what do you think about the possibility of getting to play for Ralph Houck? And I said, well, who's Ralph Houck? And he looked at me, and it was one of those, you got to be kidding me. So, after they all got done making fun of me, and, I don't know anything about anything, it was like, so after all that craziness went on, I went home, and a few days later, the scout for the Detroit Tigers showed up at my front door, Jack Deutsch. So Jack Deutsch comes into the house, and he wants to negotiate. So I mean, I don't know anything about negotiating, and my dad was like representing me, so it was me and my dad in the living room. Jack Deutsch says, "Okay, here, the Tigers are prepared to offer you $60,000," and I was just like, that just, you know, 100,000, 60,000, it's all the same to me. $60,000, like, man. So to be perfectly honest with you, I had accepted I signed a letter of intent, let's put it that way, to go to UCLA. I had gone on recruiting trips to different colleges, like Tom said, around the area. Went to USC, UCLA, Nebraska, Arizona State, and Cal Berkeley. Okay, I picked UCLA because they were close to home, and I just loved all of the coaches that I met there. Their facility was amazing. It's like this place here. It was right downtown in Westwood, where Hollywood and everything. It was like the most beautiful place. So I was thinking, what could go wrong here? Dick Vermeil came out to our house one night. My mom cooked him dinner. So, it was just a great deal. And John McKay was the head coach at USC. I had gone to Arizona State, Nebraska, like I said, and then I went to Cal Berkeley. So Cal Berkeley sent a guy down, and I'll be honest with you, I had no interest at all going to Cal Berkeley. I was looking at all the top athletic programs, and even though they had, Jackie Jensen, who was in the Hall of Fame, was their head baseball coach. Mike White was their head football coach. But the guy that was recruiting me was about the coolest guy I'd ever met. And he's the guy that kept me, I couldn't let go of this guy. I couldn't tell him no. And even when he wasn't at my school or didn't show up at my house, he would send me cards in the mail. I thought, this guy's the most awesome guy. And funny story, and I'll tell this because I just think it's kind of an amazing deal. I don't think you could get away with it today. But during our football season, when I was being recruited, Cal Berkeley was coming down to Southern Cal to play USC at the Coliseum where USC played their home games. So they were going to play their game on a Saturday. We played our high school game on Friday, the day before. So the guy that was recruiting me asked our head football coach if it would be all right if their marching band could come and play at halftime at our high school football game. And I was like, well, I'm not even going to be out there. I'm going to be in the locker room. I can't watch them. And they go, that's okay. We want to do this. They need the practice anyway. They're performing the next day, get a chance to run through their routines and all that. So I thought, wow, this is amazing. So we play the first half of the game. We go into halftime. And all of a sudden, out of the back of the end zone of this high school we were playing at, here comes this marching band. It's like Michigan's or Michigan State's marching band. There was, 200 of them or 250 of them or however many. They filled up the whole field. And they're marching and doing all their, programs and in and out and da-da-da, and they're playing amazing. And my dad had brought a buddy that had come out from Pennsylvania to visit to watch the game. So they're sitting there watching the halftime performance, and all of a sudden this guy looks over at my dad and says, you know what? He goes, this has got to be the greatest high school band I've ever seen in my life. So, they got a big kick out of that, and I got a kick out of it, and I think everybody that was there, was entertained, obviously. So, that was a pretty special moment for me. But, again, I ended up signing with the Tigers. They offered me $60,000. I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I had an opportunity to go to college and play football and baseball. And I just, the thought of leaving home, I'd never left home before. Honestly, I had just turned 18 like a few days before this guy showed up at my doorstep. And the whole thought of leaving home and going out on my own at that point wasn't real appealing to me, okay? So, I'm hemming and hawing, and I said, I go, wow, $60,000, that's a lot of money. I go, but I don't know if I'm ready to do it. I'm not ready to say yes to that. And the first thing Jack says to me, well, that's all the money there is. He goes, if you're trying to hold out for more money, he goes, I'm telling you right now, that's all I have to offer you. And I go, no, that's all right. I go, I'm not asking for any more money. I just need time to think about this. So my dad, in that interim, he says to Jack, hey, can I take Lance back in the back room for a second? And he goes, yeah, go ahead. So we go back in the bedroom, and he closes the door, and I sit down, and he sits down, and he looks at me, and he goes, $60,000. You know, he goes, you know how much money that is? You know how long it would take me to make $60,000? And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I go, I'm not ready to pull the trigger yet. I need some time to think about this, you know. So anyway, we go back out and we tell him, and he goes, all right, well, I'll be back the next day or a couple days. I don't know when it was, but so he shows up the next time he shows up at the house, and the first thing he says when he walks in the door, okay, we're prepared to offer you $67,500. And I was like, so this is how negotiations work right here, right? So anyway, I got an education in that, and I had made up my mind that I was going to go ahead and sign with the Tigers. It was like baseball was always my first love. I was ready to give it a whirl. I figured if I was the #1 draft pick, I was going to get as good an opportunity as I would ever get to make it, and probably, thank God, I was a #1 draft pick because I was horrible my first few years in the minor leagues, but it all worked out. So, yeah, so that was the story up to that point.
Well, you know, in our various conversations with each other, your relationship with your father really comes out as being strong. As you said, he represented you. You brought home all sorts of stuff from that you collected out in the desert, so you could build cages together for, you know, there were snakes, there was toads, there were, you know, frogs and whatnot. But again, Lance was really close to his dad, all except for the night he wrecked his car. And you know, we've not talked about this for
we
a
haven't
while.
talked about that. As a matter of fact.
What happened that night?
Well, that was you know, one of my worst nightmares. Actually, I had just gotten my driver's license, and you know, my dad let me drive his car, so I went down to my buddy's house and stayed there. And obviously, I had a curfew. I think my curfew was at 11 o'clock. I had no idea I didn't have a watch. I didn't know what time it was. So I'm driving home, and we were out running around, and I dropped him off, and then I took off. Well, I came to an intersection, and there was a gap. When I came to the intersection, I was facing the opposite corner of the intersection. There was a gas station right there, and the whole inside of the gas station was lit up, and I was thinking there's got to be a clock on the wall somewhere, you know. So I was looking for a clock, and I couldn't find one, you know. I wanted to make sure I was on time. I didn't want to break my curfew like the first night I was out. So anyway, there's nobody driving on this road, right? And all of a sudden I see a car. You know, I'm stopped at the red light, and a car goes through the intersection. And I saw him go by, and I'm still looking, and all of a sudden, like, you know, turns green. I'd go ahead and turn. I don't know if it turned green or not, but I turned anyway. And I'm thinking I'm driving, and I'm looking in there to see if I can see a clock, and all of a sudden, boom, I ran right into the back of somebody. And this guy that had just gone through the intersection had stopped. He pulled off the side of the road, and I smashed right into the back of him. Well, I had the radio jamming about as loud as you could have it go. And when I hit him, the button popped off of it. So I couldn't even turn the radio down. So, you know, I mean, when I hit him, I was in shock. I mean, because I not only hit him, I still had my foot on the gas. I, like, drove him another 10 feet. Man, and I'm sitting there like, oh, my gosh. And he jumped out of the car, and I got my window up, and he's banging on my window. And I'm rolling the window down, the music's blasting, and he's yelling at me, turn that radio off, you know, and I'm a mess. So, you know, he, as soon as he got done screaming at me, he goes, what the heck are you doing? I go, what are you doing? I go, I saw you go through the intersection, and you stopped. What'd you stop for? You know, and I don't know what you remember what he said. But, you know, now all of a sudden he's talking to me, and he goes, okay. He goes, no, we don't want to get the cops involved in this, right? And I'm thinking, no, we do not. But this guy doesn't know my dad's a cop. So anyway, you know, there's no cell phones back then, so I had to run across the street and get in the payphone and call my dad, who was just right up the street. And I said, you know, I'm sorry, you know, I smashed into the back of some guy, and, you know, he was like, oh, my gosh. So he comes driving down with one of our neighbors. And, you know, this guy's talking a mile a minute, and my dad's just like, just hold on. So I explained to him what happened. And I said, this guy doesn't want, he said, don't get the cops. I don't think we should get the guy. He goes, ah. He goes, I'm a cop, for God's sakes, kind of that kind of a deal. So anyway, long story short, they had to pull. We all had to try to grab a hold of the fender and pull the fender, because it was bent into our tire. It really didn't do a whole lot to his car, but it bent the fender into my dad's car. It was touching the tire, so we had to bend that back out and then drive it back to the house. Well, I was involved in 4-H at the time, and I had a little bit of money from raising a steer, and I had, when I sold my steer, that money went into fixing my dad's car. So, needless to say, this guy called, the next day and was complaining he had whiplash and the whole 9 yards. But the reason he didn't want to get the cops involved, but he didn't have any insurance. So, it was just it was this, it was that. But it was like, I was freaked out when I drove my dad's car, I don't know how many times, a couple times, and I smashed it, And he was pretty cool about it, though. I will say that. He was a good dude about it.
All right, back to your baseball career. You signed with the Tigers. You're 18 years old, barely. It's your first time leaving home, and you have to leave L.A. to fly to Tampa on an all-night flight, a red-eye, and you get to Tampa, and then you have to take the shuttle to Lakeland, which is about another, 45 miles. And you get to Lakeland, you check into Fetzer Hall, which was back then a rickety old World War II barracks. And there's nobody there to welcome Lance to Tiger Town except for the guy behind the counter who shows him to his room. So it's probably, maybe 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And nobody's around. Lance is tired. Again, he's flown all night. So he flops down on the bed. Lance, what happened then?
Well, as soon as I closed my eyes, the door flew open. And it was our farm director, Hoot Evers, the guy that runs the minor leagues.
Well, he was pounding on the door, wasn't he?
Well, he banged on the door, and then the door, it startled me, and then the door flew open, and he's standing in the doorway, and I didn't even know who this guy was. I'd never met him before. And as Tom said, I flew all night long. I was a nervous wreck. I didn't sleep a wink on the airplane. It's the first time I'd ever been away from home. I flying to Tampa, get on a shuttle, go all the way out here, and as soon as I got in the room and dropped my bags, I hit the wall. I was fried. So I jumped in bed, and he come busting in, and it wasn't like, hey, Lance, it was, what the hell are you doing in bed? Kind of a deal. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I said, I flew all night, and, the guy told me to come in here, and nobody was out there to tell me what to do, and, I haven't slept in I don't know how long, and he goes, I'm going to tell you what. He goes, you need to get your butt out to the clubhouse and get fitted for you. The guys that are here are working out right now, and you're supposed to be working out with them. So I'm just like, holy cow. So, I jumped up and, throw my clothes back on, and off I go to the clubhouse, get fitted for a uniform. And part of the uniform was they gave me a pair of wool long sleeves. And we're talking mid-June in Florida, and it was some kind of smoking hot. So anyway, I get out on the field. We have brief introductions. Next thing I know, I'm out on third base taking ground balls because, again, they signed me as the third baseman. So I'll bet you I took ground balls for 2 hours. And I sweat. I was soaking wet when I was done. Let's put it that way. Took some batting practice, and when that day was over, I hit the bed and I passed out till the next morning. But what a rude awakening that was for Hoot Evers to jump in.
That's some first day as a Tiger.
Oh my gosh!
So you're in the minor leagues, and who turns out to be the biggest influence on you in the minors?
Well, I'm sure everybody that follows the Tigers remembers the name Les Moss. So Les Moss was my manager in AA and in AAA, and then when we got to the big leagues, he was there right after Ralph Houck retired. Okay, interesting thing, taking a step back, he was the one that informed me of this. But another one of Hoot Evers' deals was after I had played rookie ball in Bristol, Virginia, which we had a great team, by the way. Our record was 52-17. We played a 70 game schedule for rookie ball, One game was rained out. We never made up. So we had a 69-game schedule, and our record was 52. And so we ran away with it. We just had a great team. And I played third base, and I made the all-star team as the third baseman, which was nice as well. When the season was over, I had to go to instructional ball back down to Florida. Okay, and that started in the middle of September, I think, because our season was over at the end of August. So when I get down to instructional ball, Hoot Evers again calls me into the office, and he says, so here's the deal. He goes, you're not playing third base anymore. We're going to make you a catcher. And I was okay with that because I had caught from Little League all the way, like I said, through high school. And he said, and we want you to switch hit. And I said, but I've never switch hit before. And he said, it's okay. It's what we're down here to work on. He says, with that short porch in right field in Detroit, if you ever get the hang of this, there's no telling how many home runs you might hit. And I was like, but I've never switch hit before. I mean, I just turned 18, and I was like, was this what they do to you when you're in pro ball? They, start messing with you? In fact, funny story about that, when I was managing up here in West Michigan a few years ago, our farm director, Dave Littlefield, we got to telling stories, and I told him that story, and he started laughing. He goes, you know what would happen to me if I took our number 1 draft pick and told him I wanted him to switch hit and just switch positions with him after the first year in rookie ball? He goes, I'd be fired on the spot. So he goes, I just think that's funny. You would never see that happen today. So anyway, when I played the whole next year in A-ball, and I switch hit. And then after that, I hooked up with Les Moss. And Les Moss was the one that came up to me and said, you're not switch hitting anymore. And I was, oh my gosh. I went from batting right-handed, played third base, and then I was catching and switch hitting, and then all of a sudden I'm not switch hitting anymore. I'm thinking, what else could they do to me? Come up to me and tell me they want me to pitch now or something crazy. So, Les, he says, you got too much power right-handed to be screwing around left-handed, and that's final. So I'm just like, okay, well, what do I have to say? I have nothing to say about it. So back to instructional ball and, doing all the drills and whatnot. Les Moss was an ex-catcher. He caught in the major leagues. He was a great mentor for me, great influence on my career. And I've said this, I don't know how many people, but if it was not for Les Moss, I would have never made it to the major leagues. He was that influential in my development. When I was in Double-A with him, the first year that I had him, the first half of the season, I was absolutely horrible hitting. I think I was hitting $180, okay? I even had Hoot Evers call me on the phone, accusing me of, are you going out and hanging out all night? Are you going to the bar? I go, oh my gosh. I go, I'm not. I said, look, I'm doing horrible. He goes, exactly. That's the reason why I'm asking. But Les had me come out, halfway through the year, and oh my gosh, I'm losing my voice now. So my deal was, I had a very hard time hitting the curveball, hitting breaking balls, okay? So he set up a drill that was to hit off the breaking ball, the curveball machine. So I was on the mandatory list. Every home day that we had a home game, I was on the early crew, which was a 10 o'clock workout. So we'd play a night game. Come 10 o'clock, I had to be dressed and ready to go on the field. He would invite a couple other of our hitters to join me, but it was basically for me, really. He just had some other guys come to work on some stuff. But I was so bad that when I was hitting off the curveball machine, he said, so I'm not going to tell you anything about your mechanics or any of that. I'm going to give you an objective here. He goes, your sight lines are right center and left center. As long as you can hit the ball up the middle, you can stay in and keep hitting. He says, but if you hit one off to the right or you hit one off to the left or you swing and miss or foul one back, you have to get out of the cage. And the next guy will go in. Okay, get that. So, curveball, I'd hit the ball or swing and miss or whatever. I'd foul one off, get out of the cage. One swing. So then we had some guys in there that were pretty good hitters, Tim Corcoran and another guy that were really good hitters out of college. They'd hit like 15, 20 balls, boom, 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 up the middle. And then I'd have to stand there and wait for them. And then I'd get in my next turn, take one swing, and I'm out. So this went on for a while. And it got to be very embarrassing for me, okay? It was like I was the number 1 draft pick, and I couldn't even do that. So it was a humbling experience, but It helped me, you know, when you have to break everything down and just go back, take baby steps. It was like I got to the point where when the ball was coming in, I just tried to like play pepper and make contact and just hit a little dribbler up the middle. And when I did that the first time, it was like, all right, you know, I did it. And then I started working at that. And then as I progressed, I started driving the ball a little bit better. Then I was hitting line drives. And then pretty soon I'm hitting the ball out of the ballpark to, you know, from where my directional areas were. And that is what in reality turned me around, because the very next year, and I started swinging the bat really good at the end of the year, and we ended up becoming Southern League champions. We had Dave Rozema on that team. Steve Kemp was on that team. We had drafted Alan Trammell that year, but he was playing down in rookie ball. But he came up to Montgomery to help us out in Double-A from rookie ball because we needed a shortstop because our shortstop was hurt. And he just, you know, was like he had been there the whole year, you know. Really made a big impact on us when he came up. So we had a really good team. We won the Southern League Championship. We all graduated the next year to AAA in Evansville, Indiana. I had my best year in the minor leagues. And as they say, timing is everything. So I had a productive year, and at the end of the year, I was a September call-up. And I stayed up in the big leagues from that point on. But I'm going to tell you what, for the first few years, I figured, man, did I make the wrong decision. I should have went to college and played football because I'm not very good at this professional baseball deal.
So as you say, it is 1977. You get the call up from Evansville. You drive up overnight from Evansville to Detroit. And in your second game, you started one game, and I don't remember what you did, but in your second game against Baltimore, you get 3 hits, you score 4 runs, you knock in 4, you hit your first home run. And then through 4 games, you had 7 hits, and you're hitting 5-something or 6-something. Are you thinking, geez, these major leagues are easy?
Yeah, man. Well, I'm ahead here. You know, all of that happened. But, you know, the funny thing is, and I had a great game my second, and my parents were in the stands, so that even made it better. They had flown out to watch. So my first actual major league game, my first time up, I grounded out to second, and I lined out to center field. But then second game, I had all this happen. But of all that stuff that went on, what sticks out, what I remember the most was my very first hit. I hit a ball that just about hit my hands. I got jammed so bad, okay? And the ball was, I wouldn't even call it a line drive. It was like a slow fly ball that went over the pitcher's head. And I was standing there watching. It was almost like it was going out in slow motion, okay? And the pitcher tried to jump up and catch it, and it just went over the top of his glove, and it landed in the grass right between the pitcher's mound and second base. Okay, and I beat it out because nobody could get to it in time. Okay, so I'm standing on first base and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is my very first hit in the major leagues. And, you know, as is customary, they stopped the game and they threw the ball out of the game so I could keep it as a souvenir. My first hit in the major leagues, right? So I was, you know, kind of, oh my gosh. So when I eventually came off the field and going to the dugout, somebody, I forget which player it was, one of the wise guys though, walked up to me and handed me my ball. Here's your first major league hit, and they had put Band-Aids all over it. So and I still have it. So quite a memento.
But anyway, you get. I mean, your major league career basically takes off from there. You're an all-star in 80, 82, and 83. You win your first Gold Glove, and you know you're really doing quite well. What all-star game was it that in which something happened? Something really strange happened.
Well, that would be the '84 All-Star
Okay.
game. If any of you remember watching that game, that was obviously the year that we were having our great year. So a bunch of us made the All-Star team. It was at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, and I was catching, and there was a play at the plate. Dave Winfield was our left fielder at the time, and I honestly, I'm going to have to go back and research this because I don't even know what the situation was. But Steve Garvey was either on second base or he was on third base. And it was either a base hit to left field or it was a fly ball left field, and he tagged up and came home. But anyway, here he comes down the line. I want to say that it was probably he was coming from second base because he wasn't, right on the line. He had a little angle to him. But when Dave Winfield came up and threw, which he has an amazing arm anyway, the throw was coming, and here comes Garvey, and I had taken my mask off, and fairly typical, and threw it off to the side. But the one thing that I was doing that I'd never done before, and I never did after that, is I was chewing gum when I was catching, right? So here comes the ball, and I'm munching on this gum, and I see the ball is coming right behind Garvey as he's running down the line. And it's like all of a sudden it's on an angle. So I know it's going to cross behind him and end up in foul territory, which it did. So I stood up and I tried to reach out as far as I could reach out to grab it and then try to get back in time to be able to apply the tag. Well, I reached out as far as I could reach out, but it just hit off the end of my glove and I didn't catch it. But I pulled my glove back in, just because that was part of the deal. And Garvey gave me a forearm shiver right to the jaw. And I must have been in mid-chew in that gum. And I felt like I bit my tongue right in half, So I was like, just to add insult to injury, I missed the ball. He was safe. He smoked me in the mouth. My tongue felt like it was, coming off. And I remember when all the dust cleared, I just was like, dang it all. And I put my hand over my mouth. Well, Dave Stieb was pitching for us. Who pitched for the Toronto Blue Jays at the time. And I had known it, I knew him pretty good. So he was standing there next to me and he goes, I had my hand over his mouth. He goes, are you all right? And I go, oh my gosh. I go, I think I bit my tongue in half. And he goes, let me see it. So I stuck my tongue out and he just goes, oh my gosh, So I'm like, when he said that, I looked down and this is going to gross, but I looked down at my wristband, and there was a chunk of my tongue on my wristband. And I bit a hole right out of the middle of my tongue, of all places. I thought I bit like a pea, but it was right in the middle of my tongue. So now it's like, great. So I have to finish, obviously, the rest of the inning. I caught however many innings after that I was supposed to catch. But, when I went into the dugout, the trainer was like, well, there ain't nothing we can do now. You want to come out of the game? I go, absolutely not. I said, I'll catch whatever however many innings I catch. So when I got done catching, they had contacted the team doctor. He met us up in the clubhouse, and he looked at it, and he's basically the same thing, like, well, it'll heal. And I go, wait a minute. I go, how am I supposed to eat anything? And he goes, well, what do you want me to do? And I go, well, can't you put a stitch in it? And he goes, well, I could try. He goes, I don't know if it'll hold. And I said, well, try. And I told Tom this. I go, the reason that I really wanted to because we had this massive Mexican spread for our postgame. I was starving, and I love Mexican food, and I wanted to dig into that, So he gave me a shot in my tongue and numbed my tongue, and he put a couple stitches in there and clamped up the hole, and I pounded a few burritos and some other stuff, and it was all good. I couldn't talk after that. I'd talk like that. But, I had always vowed after that game, if I ever get the chance to pay Steve Garvey back, man, I don't even care. I'm not even going to try to catch the ball. I'm just going to unload on him. And lo and behold, who do we play in the World Series? The Padres with Garvey on there. But, it never came to fruition. But, I've let that go for now. So.
Well, we've got to hurry on and talk more about the 1984 season. That happened in 1984, that All-Star game. But we called it the Enchanted season because you all know about 35-5. It was a great start, and it was a wonderful season. But what you don't know is that at the beginning of the season, the Tigers were in Minnesota, and they won they opened the season well, and then they go to Chicago, and Jack Morris is on the mound on a cold Saturday, and Lance is the catcher, and Jack throws a no-hitter. He strikes out Ron Kittle for the last out, and the Tigers, this is the greatest story, I think, of the entire year. The Tigers are in the clubhouse. They're all congratulating Jack. They're slapping each other on the back. Not only are they off to a great start, but one of their teammates has already thrown a no-hitter. Sparky's out with the players, and the phone in his office rings, and Sparky's not there to answer it. So the clubhouse kid, probably a teenager who doesn't know he's the visiting clubhouse kid, and he doesn't know the players. So he answers the phone, hello, and it's Jim Campbell, the Tigers president. And he says, I want to talk to Jack Morris. And the poor kid goes, okay, I'll go get him. But he doesn't know what Jack looks like. So he taps Lance on the shoulder and says, you've got a phone call. And so Lance goes, me? And he says, yeah, you. And Lance goes to Sparky's office to take the phone call. And Lance, tell him what happened then.
Well, obviously, Jim Campbell's the president of our club. So he called, and, when I got on the phone, he was so excited. It was like, oh, my gosh, what a great game. The people, back here are so proud of you, and what a great day for the Tigers, and what a great day for, Michigan and Detroit. And, he's just going on and on. And I'm like, wow, this is so cool, and he was complimenting me. And the great thing about that was I thought to myself, I was the catcher. And nobody ever gives the catcher any credit when somebody throws a no-hitter. But here's the president of our ball club calling me in the clubhouse to tell me what a great job I did. And I was like, this is awesome. So he's going on, and then right in the middle of it, he goes, hey, there's going to be a little something extra in your next paycheck for this. And I go, you're kidding me. I go, oh, my gosh. I mean, does it get any better than that? So, he's going on, and he at the very end of it, he goes, when you struck that last guy out, he goes, I about fell off my chair. And I go, when I struck that last guy out, I go, wait a minute. I go, who do you think you're talking to? And he goes, well, who is this? I said, well, this is Lance. He goes, well, what the hell are you doing on the phone? And I go, well, the kid came over and got me and said you wanted to talk to me. He goes, well, I don't want to talk to you. He goes, I want to talk to Jack. And then he started getting on me. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. I mean, this guy came and got me. So I'm thinking, all right, that ain't right. So I said, well, before I got off the phone, I said, well, what about that little extra something you were going to put? And he goes, get off the phone. I want to talk to you. So, he was, so what? So, I mean, at that point, I was like, all right, this guy, I mean, he went from being, I love this guy to now I don't like this guy at all. So I took the phone and I set it down on Sparky's desk. And I walked out and closed the door, and I never did get Jack. We were all out there jumping around and, having a good time. I said, the heck with him. Eventually they connected, and Jack did get his little extra something.
But Lance, what was, we talk about this frequently, what was the feeling of going 35-5 like? And we'll end this part of the session with these questions. What was playing for Sparky like? And what was, you can describe what Willie Hernandez was like as a teammate, and also Jack. I mean, I had my difficulties with Jack. He got off to a great start in 1984, and then kind of he leveled off and blamed the media and stopped talking. And then Sparky finally told him to, start talking to the media again. And when he did, he said, to my competitor at the Free Press, okay, I'm talking to you guys again, but there's one guy I really don't like, and that's Tom Gage. And he said he should be covering shuffleboard. So anyway, what was 35-5 like? What was Sparky like?
Well, I mean, you can't really even put into words what 35-5 was like, right? I mean, that's just so unrealistic. I've told this story a number of times where when we actually won our 35th game, we were out in Anaheim. And so that put us at 35-5. Eventually, when the day was done and I got to the hotel room, I plopped down on my bed and I'm just, going through the day's events. And I'm thinking to myself, here I am playing in the major leagues. we've played our first 40 games and we've won 35 of them. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And I thought, this is absolutely amazing. And on top of that, we not only went 35-5, but we went 17-0 on the road, which is crazy as well. I always try to pay attention to how teams start now. A couple years ago, the Tampa Bay Rays started out 13-0, and I'm saying to myself, no way. There's no way they can do this. And then it all caught up to them, and they lost a bunch of games. So our record is intact. But 35-5 was just, it was an amazing accomplishment. I'm sure you could ask everybody that played on that team, what do you think about the 35-5? And they go, it was an amazing accomplishment. And no way in the world would any of us ever have expected that to happen. But that just kind of put not only a little bit more pressure on us as a team, but it put a big bullseye on us every time we went into another city, because everybody wanted to knock off the Tigers that started out 35-5. And lo and behold, we leave Anaheim and go to Seattle, and we got swept by the Mariners of all teams. Okay, so that just opened the door for me to start, my wheels spinning. When I sat down at the coffee shop one morning having breakfast, I picked up the newspaper. I think it was on the last day before we left Seattle. And I looked at the standings, and Toronto was right behind us. I mean, we started out 35-5, and Toronto, I thought to myself, if we lose another series and Toronto wins a series, they're going to be right behind us. It's like, I couldn't believe that anybody could possibly be that close. The middle portion of the season was kind of a grind for us. We did play above 500 baseball, but not by much. But I mean, we stayed after it. It was not easy. But when we got towards the end of the schedule, I think we dialed it back up and started playing better and started getting prepared. I think Sparky's mindset was, I'm just going to let these guys play, even though, he cracked the whip occasionally during the course of the season. But towards the end of the season, it was like, the racehorse coming down the home stretch. Let's go, boys. We got to get our game together and get ready for the playoffs and blah, blah, blah. And, so he did everything possible to keep us motivated, and I think we responded to that very well. So, we went into the postseason, and I think we had won our division by 15 games or whatever. So we had put some distance between us and everybody else. But it's just, that was just amazing. And again, my own opinion, probably everybody else's, I don't think anybody will ever duplicate a 35-5 start. It's just, it was impossible for us to do it, and I think it will be just as impossible for anybody else to do it.
Well, and everybody remembers the World Series, the 5-game triumph over San Diego, and everybody remembers Kirk Gibson's home run off Goose Gossage. But not everybody remembers Lance Parrish's home run off Goose Gossage, and it was huge. It was a 7th-inning home run. I think it gave you a 2-run lead. Bavacqua hit a home run later to narrow it back to a 1-run lead, and then Gibson, of course, hit his home run. But it was Lance's home run that really kind of tenderized the Goose.
Well, they actually brought Goose in that when they brought him in to face me. And, the thing that I always remember was that I was standing on deck when they brought him in, and I'm just thinking to myself, oh, man, I never get any hits off of this guy. It's like, here I got to face the Goose. But that year was the year that the movie Ghostbusters came out. I don't know if you remember that. So when I'm standing on deck and I got these things going through my mind about having to face him, all of a sudden, they start playing the music through the loudspeakers. It was the theme song to Ghostbusters, And then at the end of it, everybody's yelling, well, they weren't yelling Ghostbusters. When they got to the end of the little jingle, everybody was chanting Goosebusters, And I thought, well, that's pretty cool, very, very clever. Leave it to our Michigan fans to come up with something like that. So they're yelling Goosebusters, and I started getting into it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, let's go. Concentrate, man. You got to get up here and face this guy. Well, I ended up hitting a home run off him, and it was kind of a line drive, and I didn't really get to enjoy it that much. It got out of the ballpark so fast, so, I ran around the bases. I was pretty pumped, to be honest with you, though. Nowhere near the drama that went along with Gibby's, and for me, that was just as much fun, if not more fun. I mean, obviously, I was very proud of the fact that I hit a home run off a goose. But I was standing on deck once again when Gibby was in the batter's box, and him and Sparky are, Sparky, he don't want to walk you, and Gibby's like, I'm going to take him deep, or, they're going. I'm thinking, Gibby, I think, struck out just about every time he ever faced this guy, but he's telling Sparky, I'll bet you $10 I take him deep, kind of thing. I'm going, "Are you kidding me?" So, but the irony in all that was it was the right thing to do to walk him intentionally. And Goose didn't want to walk him. And I know Goose, felt like I've struck this guy out every time I face him. I am not walking him. So I always try to throw a little dig Gibby's way. And I go, look, here's the deal. If you haven't come to this realization yet. The last time I was up, I hit a home run off. And he didn't want to face me again. So he decided to pitch to you and gave you the opportunity to do that, which is not true at all. But, I figured I'd throw that in there. But when he hit that home run, it was like, okay, that's it. I think everybody in our team was like, we're world champions. There is no way these guys are coming back from that because we got Willie Hernandez. You know what I mean? And Willie was lights out the whole year. So I think that was when everybody started, in their minds party a little bit and think, okay, we are the world champions of 1984.
And that was the end of the Enchanted season.
And that surely
So-
was.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. I'm sure we've got some questions. Raise your hand and I will give you the mic.
Hi, Lance. It's an honor. I'd like to hear, as a catcher, what it takes to catch a guy at second base. What's the difference between getting him and him being safe? And does the pitcher cue you, the first baseman, the runner? What does it take to get a guy out at second base as opposed to him being safe?
Well, there's a lot of intangibles in that. There's a lot of checks and balances, let's say. Number one, unless the pitcher gives me an opportunity and gets the ball to me in a certain, there's an equation that goes with this, mathematical equation. And all the guys that are on the bench, the coaches and whatever that have stopwatches, they're all timing the pitcher, okay? Whenever a pitcher, in the beginning of the game, whenever a pitcher comes set and there's a guy on base that comes set and then he delivers the ball, they all time him to see how fast it takes him once he breaks to get the ball to the catcher. So that's part of the equation. It's X amount of time for him to get the ball from, the time he breaks to the time he gets it to me. And then the other part of that equation is how fast it takes me, once I receive the ball, to get it out of my glove and throw it to second base. As I mentioned to you earlier in that story about working out in Anaheim, and the guy going, if you can get the ball, down to second in under 2 seconds, well, that's part of the equation. So successful catchers, have to be, for the most part, there's always something, crazy that might go on. But, typically, if you can get the ball down to second base in 2 seconds or under, and in some cases, 1.9 and under, in the 1/8. When Ricky Henderson was stealing, I had to change my whole approach to throwing just to try to get him. Because I thought, I can't throw the ball any better. And every time I would put it right on the money and he would just beat it. It drove me crazy, okay? So catchers always have this little mechanical thing they do where they shift their feet and take a step and throw. So what I tried to do was I said, okay, I can't make my arm any stronger, and I have a pretty good transfer from my glove, to the ball into my hand. But what I could do is I could eliminate that step. So I would cheat. Now I have to demonstrate this a little bit. So if I'm catching and my feet are parallel behind the plate and I'm given a target, so that's when I'm throwing this way. When Ricky Henderson was on base, I would cheat and drop my back foot, my right foot back. And I would try to not even take any step at all. Well, I would step with my left foot, okay? I left this foot right where it was. So I would catch the ball, make my transfer, and throw it. I never had to shift my feet. And that might have taken off just a fraction, but fractions mean everything when you're trying to throw somebody out, especially a Ricky Henderson or one of those other guys that's super fast. But, I did get him. As a matter of fact, Somebody sent me some statistical thing they dug out of who knows where, but they had a stat in there about the catchers that threw Ricky Henderson out. And I think I threw him out the most times. But Bob Boone had the highest percentage throwing him out. But that's fine. At least I can lay claim to the fact that I threw him out most amount of times.
Lance, I've got a question for you that the people might be interested in. The Tigers hit into a triple play last night.
Yeah.
Were you ever on a team that hit into a triple play?
Not to my, no.
Okay.
I'm sure I would have remembered that.
That
so
was
no.
one weird triple
How
play.
about that, huh?
Yeah, it hadn't happened since 1929.
Well, I've seen plays where we almost did it. Usually there's guys on first and second, and the guy hits a sharp ball to ground ball to third, and the third baseman steps on third and fires it to second, and then, boom. But this one was, I saw what happened, and the runner on third base had just, took off and
Well, he
ran
made
home.
a mistake, yeah.
Yeah, I think he, my understanding was he thought the ball had bounced before it went to the pitcher, so.
Okay, we're going to have time for one more question, so we can, lucky you, so we can have time to do some book signing.
Okay, very good. You look great. I
Well,
know
thank you.
you're in your 60s, but you look like you could get back out there right away. Are you going to manage some more? This question one real quickly. Are you going to get back into managing at all?
Probably not. I
Okay.
think that I'm viewed as, beyond that.
And I'm sorry, I won tickets for the '84 World Series through work. And it was for Game 5. It was amazing. And it was my son's 10th birthday.
No
I
kidding.
put
How
the
about
tickets
that?
in a card, and I says, guess where we're going tomorrow? And, of course, we're thrilled with the win. But people went out in the field, and they're tearing up sod and throwing it up in the upper deck. We were right behind home plate in the upper deck. So that will be a lifelong memory.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you bet. Well, it's one of my lifelong memories, I can tell you that. That was great night. Yeah, well, thank you.
Make sure we have time for book signing, and so what we're going to do is let Tom and Lance get out to the table.
Oh, before we do that.
Yes.
So here's the deal. I'm more than if you brought like a baseball card or some piece of memorabilia, I'm more than happy to sign that. But you're going to have to wait until after we sign all the books. If you don't mind. Obviously this is a book signing deal, and we want to get all the books signed and all that first. But if you have something else, if you stick around, I'll be happy to sign whatever else you have. All
Yeah,
right?
the line just moves too slowly if you interrupt for memorabilia.
Thank you, Beth.
That sounds great. Thank you. So let's give a few moments to get our
Okay.
stars out to the table.
Okay. Thank you. And there's a million more stories in the books.